We are here to talk about the merging of branding and content. And to do that, we have our panel here. Directly on my right, we have David Moore, who is chairman of Xaxis and president of WPP Digital. Thank you, David. Directly to his right is Peter Meier. And Peter is the founder of Metaio, which creates software for augmented reality experiences. We will get to what that means a little bit here later on. Next to him is Lucas Kircher, founder of his own content marketing company, Kircher Burkhardt, correct? Pardon?
KB.
KB, gotcha. Which is the largest content marketing agency in Germany. And on the end, we have Shane Snow, who's also a founder of a content marketing company. And that is Contently, which is based here in New York. Although you don't like to specifically call yourselves a content marketing company, correct?
We like to call ourselves a technology company. We make media and software, and the point of it is to help brands tell stories, but we stay away from content marketing company, I guess.
So I'm curious about that. Why would you, in branding yourself, why do you guys talk about yourselves more as a technology company than a media company?
Because we think of what brands are trying to do with content and content marketing as bigger than just that discipline. We think of it as something that's existed for a long time, which is that brands have wanted, since the beginning of commerce, they've wanted to build relationships with customers and potential customers, and that since the beginning of time, we've built relationships as a society by telling stories. And so we kind of see storytelling as this thing that sits on top of any sort of practice of the day. It used to be, connecting with people through search engines and SEO, and now there's social media, and content is really, I think, the root of what makes good content and good relationships are stories that fuel all of those practices.
Interesting. That also kind of reminds me of something that we spoke about yesterday, Lucas. When we had our phone call, you specifically said content is not king, which is the opposite of what pretty much everybody in digital media is essentially saying right now. And I was curious if you could elaborate on what exactly you meant.
Two things. First thing is content is really an overused word. We have over 50.
Yes.
We have over 50 journalists, and they really hate the word content marketing. So I'm completely understanding why I don't like it, but it's the name of the game. And the other side is it's all about conversations, real conversations going out in the real with real people. And content is just a really great tool. Or better said, stories is a really great tool to tap into those conversations. A lot of companies right now think they have to be media companies, so they push out content. And they don't have a real great audience on that. Most of them don't. And they are now finding out that the most important thing is not producing content, where there's already a lot of content, but to find out where are the most interesting conversations between real people that are already actually happening, and how they could tap into that with great stories, with great content. And that's the difference.
Interesting. I was hoping you could kind of elaborate on that a little bit. When you talk about how does that manifest itself in terms of identifying a conversation and then interjecting yourself in some way? I mean, how does that play out?
First of all, we bought a big data and analytics company last year to do exactly that, to find out where are real conversations with real people, with real traffic, with real passion, finding what kind of conversations are there, and where are intersections between what real people are talking and what a brand could be interested in. And then they find a little intersection, a topic of interest that is interesting for both parties, for real people, but also for the brand. And then we start to produce content that caters to that exact conversation, which is better than producing content and trying to find someone to read it. People don't have time.
Interesting. I'm curious, Shane and David, I was hoping you'd speak to this as well. I mean, is that the similar strategy you guys take in your content strategy, for the lack of a better word?
I guess you're saying like mining data to figure out where conversations should be. Certainly, I mean, different brands. So we work with a panoply of brands and agencies and media companies that are trying to help build relationships through stories. And so certainly the question of what should we be talking about and where should it go is the big one that people are talking about. It's the big question that our customers come to us first. But talking about this idea of stories and conversations, you think about what the news used to be back when all there were newspapers and these newsboys on the corners saying extra, extra. The news was the thing that you sat down with people and talked about later. That was, they were talking points. I think a lot of companies now that everyone's obsessing over content marketing and branded content, they're thinking of content as a product, as a thing that they sort of crank out like they do any other product that they're doing. But really the point of the news historically was to get people talking. And so I think when you approach it from that kind of angle, it changes the way that you actually create this stuff and the way you think about who you're targeting and who would actually care about this and say something about this to their friends.
You know, I think it's interesting that we talk about content as an overused word because content is everywhere. In fact, you can't go on the web and not find content. And the only difference between now and about 25 or 30 years ago is there's no barriers to entry to having your content displayed, so everybody can do it. So when you look at the various types of content, we saw Vice, we saw Red Bull, they produce great content, but it's not what I would call content that's developed for the advertiser. In other words, content to actually convey a message, a brand message for the advertiser. They go after the audience. They get it. They hit them with the brand. That's a lot different than what you're seeing in native advertising, where it's a story about the brand that kind of ropes you in. You see this in the pharmaceutical industry, where they talk about how a drug can particularly help a particular type of disease. But in our business, the right ad in front of the right person, the right time, in the right language, ceases to become an ad, becomes a useful piece of content.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Peter, I think that would be kind of a good opportunity for you to speak. So, you know, there was this company, Oculus. They make this headset. They raise a bunch of money on Kickstarter. Everyone thinks they're going to revolutionize gaming. And end up getting bought by Facebook, which was kind of head-scratching to me, and I would happen to imagine for a bunch of other people. But in terms of augmented reality and kind of these different devices and where we're going to kind of see media displayed, that's an area that you focus on almost entirely, correct?
Yeah, I mean, so we focus on computer vision recognizing the real world, and we see augmented reality to be one really useful vertical of that. So once we know what you're looking at, out of millions of objects, we can then try to find useful content and kind of put the content there. So kind of pushing the frontier of where you can place content away from just desktop or even, I mean, mobile. Everybody's talking about mobile, but it's basically a desktop in your hand, right? It's not like that big of a change, except that you have it with you. But really being able to find completely new ways of pushing content depending on what you are seeing and placing content in a completely new context, like with the IKEA catalog that we did, where you can place a piece of furniture in your own living room and see how that looks like.
How is this going to, call it content marketing, call it sponsored stories? How is it going to affect advertising and this kind of media distribution?
I have no idea about content marketing, so I'm like this German engineer on this panel. So, I mean, how is it affecting? I think your point is right. I mean, if you want to have effective ads that turn from ads into something useful, then I think we can provide ways of making interaction with your content, like your Lego box or your IKEA piece of furniture, a fun experience and a useful experience that's valuable, and turning from pushing there's this new piece of furniture there for you at this price point to here's how it looks and hey, that looks great in my living room. So kind of bringing a new level of value to content, branded content. I just learned that.
So Shane, your kind of company kind of focuses on making brands act like publishers. Lucas, you're a company that very much does the same, and you also talked about publishers need to kind of act like agencies in terms of, in order to help them deal with all the revenue problems they're dealing with. And David, you work for an agency that very much acts kind of like a media company. Why does everybody want to be somebody else? I'm kind of curious why that is. Shane, you laughed.
Good question. So we're a startup, so we're just trying to change the world or whatever. I watched Silicon Valley, and that I was horrified when they started talking about like using algorithms to change the world. But we started our company because we wanted to help build a better media world, and we thought that meant who are the people that have a stake in the media world? Publishers, creators, which is where I come from, and from journalism, and then consumers. And so we got into the branded content thing because our customers, who were publishers, were increasingly brands with money to pay journalists to do good work. And so we kind of staggered into this. But you know, we've seen so in the very beginning of our company, someone had to whiteboard out for me the difference between a creative agency and a media agency, because I had no idea. But now we've seen that every type of agency and every type of startup is trying to get their hands in this new category. And because it's a new category, and because content and stories kind of flow out to any kind of advertising or publicity, everyone wants to get into it, and there's a lot of money there. And so I think the big debates to come are, you know, what types of agencies will provide value? Will media companies become the agencies and cut, you know, PR agencies out? And all of that is really, we get to sort of be the arms dealer to everyone, hopefully. But it's fascinating.
That would
to
be
sort of
nice,
observe
yeah.
that, yeah.
I don't think content, this is new, none of this. It started with the Kraft movie Playhouse 50 years ago. You can call that branded content. The only difference is there's no barriers to entry. Biggest challenge any content developer has is getting an audience behind it. And when you talk about ad agency wanting to be a media company, I've always been a media guy. And we're a media agency that's morphed into a media company, in part because guys like me are part of it. So ultimately, content, what else is new? You know, how are you going to make it different? How are you going to get an audience? And how are you going to measure what it really does on behalf of an advertiser?
I definitely want to get back to that, but getting back to my earlier question, Lucas, I was curious, why is everyone trying to be kind of all of these different things?
I'm not a startup, so we kind of bootstrapped company, and I don't want to be disrupted by guys. So that's why I want to change. I have to change. And I think I have worked 10 years in the media industry. I was working at newspapers, and I was feeling all this disruption in 2000. I have exactly the same feeling now for the agency business in general. So we are in the beginning of a very big disruption. I have no clear sight where it's really going to end, but we are trying to go in this direction, wherever it is. And I think there are three main drivers of this disruption. It's new technology, like programmatic buying and other stuff that makes communication more relevant through being on right time and place and in the right context. It's new methods that probably would be content marketing, native advertising, but also something like real-time marketing, so new strategies, new methods, and the third one, of course, new channels, like social, mobile, and so on and so forth. I can't do anything about the new channels, I just can learn them. I can do something about new technology, that's why we completely switched our model. We are half digital, half technology company now. And I can certainly do something about this new possibility of content being more stronger than typical advertising, and that's where we are, where we go.
So then, you know, if agencies are kind of on the verge of, you know, this kind of fundamental change, what is the successful agency of the future? What does it look like, and how does it differ? And David, I would love to get your take too.
Well, one, it looks like Xaxis, which is the fastest growing part of WPP. It's going to do over $800 million in revenues this year with, let's call it 8-figure profit, right? So the question is, how fast can we continue to evolve models like this? Because if you look at the agency business, the Mad Men days are over. They're not coming back. And that's why you have everybody trying to get into different parts of the business. The whole business of the ad agency and the ones that used to produce the commercials, whole value chain has blurred now. So a Yahoo will go in with a creative idea. So will AOL and some of the others. And advertising is content. So everybody's competing with one another, which actually is a good thing for the advertiser. The biggest issue is that the audiences continue to fragment, And to the extent that you're in a position to aggregate very specific audiences, like Vice does, which of course is a WPP investment, you will begin to win the game as long as you can get scale with those audiences and be able to put that advertising message into that content in a way that's effective.
So I'm kind of curious if you're scared of Digiday coming in and playing agency because they already have the audience, as these media companies start to behave as the strategy and the content development for brands. Does that cut you guys out? We're observing some.
Yeah, I mean, look, Digiday is going after a very different audience than those which we seek. We piggyback on audiences, right? We do have part of the company Group M, which is an entertainment division that's run by Peter Tortorici, who used to be president of CBS, an accomplished executive in the video content business. So we do that type of work. But there's so much audience out there. You can find it on a broad basis. Very difficult to target very specific audiences like Vice does. And so what we do is we look to piggyback on those that are successful with it by bringing in the appropriate advertisement, which could be a blatant ad, could be very soft, it could be native advertising, it could actually be a little story that Digiday writes because they're very interested in what we've done.
Yeah, and just to give some people some context, my publication actually has a content studio, a native advertisement wing that will, create stories on behalf of our advertisers, which many publishers are doing, and it kind of makes the field that you guys are in that much more competitive. So I'm curious what it's like for you guys to walk into a room and say, we want to create this sponsored story, whatever it's going to be, and suddenly, you have people from the content studio at the New York Times is in there as well, and you have to compete against them for a pitch. I'm curious, how do you differentiate from them?
Yeah, so for us, we work with a lot of these folks. What you need, no matter what kind of organization you are.
You work with them being the publishers.
Yes, yeah. Not in all cases, but you need tools and you need talent to tell stories. And our company basically provides tools, software tools. We have freelance talent, and then we create education and media to sort of be helpful. So in many cases, our clients are media companies that don't have the capacity internally to do this all in-house, or who want to have a sort of a Chinese wall between their editorial side and that. So when you guys build a content studio, part of that is to separate the different parts of the business, right? But if McDonald's comes to Digiday one week and BMW comes the other week, you might want to use different journalists with auto and food specialties, and in that case, you might be using freelancers, and that's where Contently becomes the kind of the talent broker. Is our relationship with folks like Gawker and the Huffington Post and Forbes. Those are the kinds of folks that we work with. So in those cases, we're brokering the talent. We also help provide tools to help track how it's doing, to help with the project management. So we're trying to build our business to be immune to whoever the players are, to be able to provide value to no matter who's playing agency.
Lucas or David, please, either one, jump in.
First of all, I don't think advertising is really content. Most of it isn't. Some of it is. It's either, for me...
It's okay. Gentlemen can disagree. That's
content gotta be either very useful or very entertaining. And if you look at most of advertising, it isn't.
Is that what we say when we say, sponsored content? Is it just, more entertaining advertising? Is that essentially what we're saying?
If it's really entertaining, then
or
it starts
informative,
to be really it's very simple. If someone freely looks at it till the end, then it starts to get content. It's very, very simple. Your question was New York Times. I would really love to pitch against them because that's the type of quality, that game that we should play. We should try hard to bring out something that's as interesting as the New York Times. What I think is difficult for publishing houses right now is that's something you learn in agencies, how do you navigate the politics of big brands, of big houses. It's half of the work you do is to find out who is really in charge, who has which hidden agenda and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure if the New York Times will be able to do that in the foreseeable future, but of course, everyone wants to go there. Every second SEO agency now rebrands itself as a content marketing agency. Every network starts content marketing activities. Everyone wants to go there.
Well, I saw Martin Nissenholtz around here. I don't know if he's in the audience now, but he worked for the New York Times for many years. And the biggest issue with that is that you have a very rigid church and state, right? Where the church is the content, the editors rule, and they still rule in a number of publishing houses. And then, of course, the state are the people that are supposed to make the money. And one of the things that's happened is that you're getting a blur between the line of church and state now. Now, it really doesn't happen with the New York Times, as far as I can tell. I haven't seen an example of it. But with Forbes, they've been on the cutting edge of putting native advertisement out there. They've got websites that just write glorious stories about the advertiser. They're clearly marked, so it's not Forbes-type content, not peer-reviewed. However, they're piggybacking on their own audiences in order to get that content seen. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's a result of the publishing business who's, been pumping out the content for years, looking for other ways to make money so that they can, too, survive in this fragmented world.
So, Peter, you might not be a content marketing guy, but you are thinking about.
I'm learning. I'm learning a lot right now. So.
Thank you. But you are thinking about how people are going to kind of maneuver throughout the world and what they're going to see and how they're going to interact with the spaces around them, which a lot of brands are also thinking about too. And I'm curious, how can a company, an advertiser, kind of play in that space effectively?
Yeah, I think we're going to see very interesting things. I mean, starting from you can, be Pepsi and become, put content on every other soft drink, or you can be like the Green Party did that in Berlin. You can invite people to complain about things they don't like and place that on products and so I think we're kind of, I'm sorry to say this, but looking at what I'm working on and all a lot of the discussions we have here is you're really currently optimizing on something that's super solid, right? The web thing now. It's like you're now squeezing out every, percentile of getting a bit more revenue from ads and so on and so forth. But I think it would be great to kind of think about, hey, how can we go from there? There's so much open space that we're not covering at all. We kind of, should be discussing that if it's, looking into the future. And I don't know. For me, it feels terrible to. It's like a statement about the education system that we heard yesterday. If I see branded content, I just don't read it. No way. I mean, for me, it doesn't work. So I rather have an ad that tells me this is it and this is the price. Right?
Interesting. Okay, so we have ads, we have all of these kind of branded pieces of media, whether they be, a Red Bull video, a sponsored story, whatever. At a certain point, this is going to become saturated. Everyone is doing it. And to David's point, the barrier to entry beyond having an internet connection is zero. Everyone can create something of their own, share it on their own. They have these distribution mechanisms now, with social. I'm curious then, you're working on behalf of an advertiser, you're making something for them. How do you ensure that they, get the reach that you had promised them? Is it simply about, using these social channels and paying for reach? Are you worried about this becoming commoditized at a certain point as well?
It already is saturated, right? So you talked earlier about advertising not being that entertaining. Well, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but I can think of a half a dozen television commercials that are fantastic, really. And I don't watch that much TV, but I remember them. And they are entertaining. They get their message across. I'll watch them more than once because I'm appreciative of them. And so I think ultimately when you go into an advertiser and you talk to them, obviously you have to know about what their objectives and goals are. But that's where we take content and we piggyback it on other people's audiences, and we pay to do that. Now, if you can create something viral, which takes off, you don't have to pay for the distribution anymore. But that's a hit or miss situation, and I would say for every viral hit, there's probably 1,000 failures.
Really, you can't optimize for virality.
You can try, but to do what Lufthansa did with Vice there, that was a very successful campaign. But have you produced a viral video? Have you tried to get your...
No, I am not.
I mean, so try it and see. It's not an easy thing to do.
I mean, if it falls on its face,
Nobody saw it, so
Right.
it doesn't make a difference.
But I think that Vice would argue that this is their business. They're good at making content that they'll make 50 pieces and one will go extremely viral, but the other 49 will do very well because they know how to meet audiences on their terms. And I think to the point of when we hit the saturation, yes, there will be there's already a lot of annoying stuff on the internet, right? It's only going to get worse. But the brands that have the budget to actually go after content marketing, go after audiences through storytelling when no one's willing to click on an ad, is trying to get people to opt in to good stories. So I analogize this to when music became easy to create and easy to distribute on the internet. Like anyone can upload their songs to the internet now, but the hits are still really good. It doesn't mean that we're all listening to crappy music. It means it's harder to stand out. It is a hits-based business, but there's really interesting stuff going on now because of that sort of meritocracy. The whole EDM movement that exploded, the last few years is because of these artists taking power sort of in their own hands. I think that sort of thing can happen with brands. Just a lot of them are going to, not invest in it, I think.
Content marketing is not a campaign-centric thinking where you try to find the one great idea that you squeeze through all these channels with all technology that you have and all insights that you have. It's more about a lot of little ideas. Some fly, some don't, some die, some get a little viral activity. It's like a groundswell around one common theme, and then some of them work, some of them don't. I just stumbled about a great piece of work. It was Hilton. I think they have this Twitter handle, Hilton Suggests. And what they're doing is they give their employees, especially at the reception, a little script that monitors Twitter traffic in, let's say, Baltimore, when the hotel is in Baltimore. And they try to get Twitter traffic out of other hotels, of competing hotels, like what can I do against my stiff neck? And then they give them content that explains that different positions of sleeping need a different pillow, and that they should go to their concierge. But it's not the Hilton, it's the competition. So that's what I mean with conversation-centric thinking. You find a conversation that makes sense to the brand, and then you help with content to really make it useful, to make it helpful for future customers. And the competition, of course, they hate it. It's like an invasion into their own discussions that they should be able to master. Simple thing.
Yeah, like, for example, what's your guys' answer to, like, the Amazon Flow, right? I mean...
Sorry?
Do you know Amazon Flow? Like these apps where it's an Amazon app where you can go into a store and you just scan any product and you get, all the comparables and things. So how would you counterattack that with content marketing? And
I don't do advertising. I'm not an expert in this.
Well, actually, I think it's a great service, but at that point in time, there's a brand there, right? And they're going to see where they can get the best buy on the brand or see if there's something comparable and make the decision. But what I think is very interesting nowadays is that there's almost instantaneous feedback on content. So you put it out there, you put your viral video out there for an hour, right? Nobody's hit it. You probably have a pretty good idea it's not going to catch on and become massively viewed. On the other hand, you get it out there for an hour and all of a sudden you got 100,000 people. It's the pyramid effect, and before you know it, you'll be famous and you'll be on, the YouTube channel as one of their key hosts. So what's nice about it is you can fail pretty fast with content, and the key is to be ready with plan B, C, D, E, F, all the way through the alphabet until you hit that right combination that is effectively doing what you want it to do.
Yeah, I think there's a really good point in there that if you you're trying to build a relationship with customers, right? So we just met, right? If you tell me a hilarious joke at the cocktail event at DLD, I might remember that, but we're not best friends. But if we sit down
Oh, well.
I mean, we're working on it, but if we sit down for coffee, once a week and talk and tell each other stories, and we send each other funny stuff on the internet, before long we're going to be friends, and we're going to have a tight relationship, a much tighter relationship than if you told the funniest joke in the party, but we're really not, we're just acquaintances. And I think that's where this consistency factor of when you log into the Amazon app, I'm not real familiar with it, but 2 products, all things being equal, I'm going to pick the one that I feel the closest relationship to. If I've been following a brand, if it's Lufthansa versus Delta, and I saw these amazing videos, and I've been watching how they're doing on social media, I'm going to pick them. Maybe even if they're a little more expensive, because of that relationship factor.
But you say you're not in advertising, right? But you're data mining, right? Because you're looking at what conversation is going on, and based on what you learn from that, you come back with what the positioning ought to be, how to enhance that conversation with the consumer. And you know what? We do the same thing, only we're not necessarily looking at the conversations.
Exactly.
We're looking at buying behavior and patterns, consumption behavior, and based on that, then we'll target the appropriate advertisement.
We search for the same outcomes, for the same goals. Just our weapon of choice is another one. It's editorial content and not advertising. But it's true. In the end, it's about PR
We're
and
brothers.
marketing.
We're brothers.
We're brothers, yeah. We're brothers.
We have a few minutes left. I would like to open it up for questions if anybody has one. Really? None? Yeah, right back here. Thank you. I know we had one. Yeah.
Not him.
Hi, Dave Morgan. I have a question for Dave Moore. You've famously been quoted over the years to describe premium publishers as those that pay too much for their content. How do you see this having evolved? I mean, we're having this content conversation, but you're basically saying it's about the audience and not the content. Do you still think that same way? And what do you say to content marketers that may be spending too much on content too?
Yeah, Dave, are we paying journalists too much?
In some cases, absolutely. But Dave, it's always a pleasure to see you. Dave and I have known each other since 1995. Well, I would say this. We define premium content a lot differently today than I did back then because...
Why do you think that is? I'm curious.
Well, I think it's because of data. I think it's data. And the reason I say that is because premium content for us today can be content on Facebook, which is a conversation, essentially. It could be conversation on LinkedIn, where it's not highly produced. But in addition to the content...
Whereas it used to be...
Well, like content in Forbes, for instance.
Gotcha.
Peer-reviewed, editorial, paying the editors a lot of money to put this out there. And but if Forbes puts 10 ads, which they don't, but if they put 10 ads above the fold and did crazy things with their editorial, even though it was good stuff, we wouldn't put an ad there because it'd be too cluttered. And so for us, part of the decision is what do they do with their ads? What type of audiences do they really attract? And from our perspective, it's premium content as long as they have the audience that we want and there is not a lot of clutter on the page that competes with our message.
Any other questions? Anybody else from the audience? Yeah, one right here. So, she's got you.
Can you talk about I guess in this context of future of content, things like augmented reality and people walking around with Google Glass and all that stuff, like how does that play into all this?
Peter?
Thanks. So, yeah, I mean, it's object recognition is just a new way kind of to target, maybe, right? I mean, for you, premium is knowing exactly who's looking at that content and knowing exactly what you're currently looking at and what you're currently interested, especially if you're already in a store. Obviously, you're there to buy something, right? then that's a great opportunity to kind of take over that place and be there. So I would guess now since I've learned about branded content, I think Amazon Flow is branded content, right? It's Amazon providing content about products with ratings and social and whatever, right? And of course, kind of giving you the opportunity to buy the same on Amazon. So that's, and I think with wearables, we will see a completely new level because currently you have to take out your phone, right? Now, next thing you're gonna have to do is just take a shot with your watch. It's gonna be less, obvious to the sales guy who you're just screwing because you're buying online. And then somebody's here with glass, right? And then you're constantly scanning the world. And that will give a whole new way of targeting, We even know your kind of view patterns. Yeah.
This has produced some of the most compelling content on the web today. This little camera, GoPro channel, by the way, which is contributed to widely by users. It's some of the greatest content you can find. How expensive is that to produce? Nothing. So premium content used to be, I spent a lot of money on this, so you should pay me more. It's not that anymore at all.
Interesting. Well, we are actually out of time, but thank you guys so much. I want to thank everyone for coming and talking. Thank you guys for being a great crowd.